My name is Roxanne. I am 30 years old, and that night marked the absolute end of my patience. The atmosphere in my Louisville living room was heavy with suffocating tension as my family sat around the dinner table, and my father suddenly stood up, his face turning crimson from uncontrollable rage. He pointed a trembling finger directly at my face and screamed his usual tired threats about destroying my professional reputation if I dared to walk out on my responsibilities now. Behind him, my older sister lounged comfortably on my velvet sofa, swirling a glass of my most expensive wine with a smug grin plastered across her face because she truly believed he would force me into submission once again. They expected me to apologize or beg for forgiveness like I always did in the past, but I simply looked straight into his furious eyes with a terrifying calmness that immediately unsettled him. He screamed at the top of his lungs, "If you don't take care of her, you will be fired." I smiled coldly before replying, "Tomorrow I'm starting a new job in Los Angeles." "Good luck, Dad." I paused just long enough to see the confusion spread across their faces before delivering the final blow. "Oh, and I already sold this house." Without waiting for another word, I stood up from the dinner table and walked away, leaving behind a deafening silence and two people who were about to realize they had just lost their only financial safety net forever. This is the story of how I escaped my toxic family and made them pay for their greed. Subscribe now to see how they faced the consequences of their actions. Everything began unraveling 3 months ago when a phone call in the middle of the night completely upended my peaceful existence. I was sound asleep after a grueling week managing the marketing department for my father's furniture company when the shrill ringtone pierced through the silence. My hand fumbled in the dark to grab the device, seeing the caller ID flash the name I dreaded most: Jessica, my older sister. Before I could even mutter a sleepy hello, her hysterical sobbing filled my ear, not asking for permission, but demanding immediate rescue. She had just been unceremoniously kicked out of her marital home by her wealthy husband after their whirlwind romance imploded in less than 6 months due to her uncontrollable spending habits. She was standing on the curb with nothing but her bruised ego stripped of the luxurious lifestyle she felt entitled to. "Roxanne, pick up. He threw me out just because I bought a few things." Jessica screamed into the phone, her voice thick with tears and entitlement. "You have to let me stay with you. I have nowhere else to go." And Dad said, "You have plenty of space." I immediately sat up in bed, my stomach churning at the thought of living with her. I tried to protest, reminding her that my house in Louisville was my private sanctuary, a modest space I bought with my own savings that wasn't equipped to handle her high-maintenance personality. "Jessica, my house isn't a hotel. Can't you stay at a hotel or go to Dad's place?" I asked, trying to set a boundary. "Dad's place is being renovated. You know that." "Stop being so selfish, Roxanne. It's just for a few weeks until I get my settlement." She snapped back the tears, instantly vanishing now that she needed to manipulate me. Against my better judgment and worn down by her guilt-tripping, I reluctantly agreed a decision I would regret almost immediately. The day Jessica arrived was nothing short of a nightmare that exceeded my worst expectations. I had cleared out the guest bedroom, expecting her to arrive with a couple of suitcases appropriate for a temporary stay. Instead, a massive moving truck pulled into my driveway, blocking the sidewalk and annoying my neighbors. I watched in disbelief as movers began unloading box after box of designer clothes, shoes, and accessories she had managed to salvage. Before I could stop them, my organized living room was transformed into a storage unit for her material obsessions. The entryway was barricaded by towers of shoeboxes, and my furniture was buried under mountains of coats that were completely impractical for our climate. When Jessica finally stepped out of her taxi, she didn't look like a woman in distress. She looked like a queen surveying a disappointing kingdom. She walked past me without a thank you, wrinkling her nose as she scanned the open-concept living area. "Is this it?" she asked, looking around with disdain. "How do you even breathe in such a tiny box? I feel claustrophobic already." I bit my tongue and showed her to the guest room I had prepared. She took one look at the queen-sized bed and scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "I can't sleep in here, Roxanne. It's too small for my energy right now," she declared firmly. "You take this room. I need the master suite. I need the ensuite bathroom for my skin air routine and to heal from my trauma." "Absolutely not," I replied, my voice hard. "This is my house. You take the guest room or you find somewhere else to sleep." She glared at me, muttering about how unsupportive I was, but eventually retreated to the guest room, slamming the door loud enough to shake the walls. The following days settled into a rhythm that was exhausting and infuriating. Jessica showed absolutely no interest in finding a job or looking for an apartment. She treated my home like an all-inclusive resort where I was the underpaid staff member. She spent her days lounging on my sofa, binge-watching reality television shows while I was at work, earning the money to pay the mortgage. When I came home exhausted in the evenings, I would find dirty dishes piled in the sink and takeout containers scattered everywhere. She would casually ask me what was for dinner without ever offering to lift a finger. If I asked about her job search, she would roll her eyes and claim she was networking. The sheer entitlement radiating from her was suffocating, and I began to realize that she had no intention of leaving. My patience was wearing thin as I watched my sanctuary turn into a prison of her making. 2 weeks after Jessica moved in, I was horrified to realize that my house had completely mutated into something unrecognizable. I drove home that Tuesday evening, expecting the usual pile of dirty dishes or perhaps a blocked driveway, but nothing could have prepared me for the visual assault waiting behind my front door. As soon as I unlocked the lock, a pungent chemical stench of fresh paint hit me instantly, triggering a headache. I stepped into the foyer and dropped my keys in sheer disbelief. My sophisticated, neutral-toned living room, a space I had spent years curating with calming grays and soft whites, was gone. In its place was a garish, headache-inducing shade of bubblegum pink that looked like the aftermath of a teenager's bedroom explosion. My jaw tightened as I scanned the walls, realizing that my limited edition abstract prints were missing. I ran to the garage in a panic and found them tossed in a damp, dusty corner, piled haphazardly next to the trash cans, their frames chipped, and the canvases at risk of warping from the humidity. I felt a surge of rage so intense my hands shook, but the destruction of my decor was only the beginning of the evening's nightmare. Walking back inside, the sound of thumping bass and raucous laughter led me to the kitchen where the scene was even worse than the pink walls. Jessica was holding court with a group of 5 or 6 strangers who looked as unemployed and entitled as she did, turning my kitchen island into a chaotic buffet. They were using my crystal coasters as ashtrays, ash spilling onto the quartz countertops I kept meticulous. But what made my blood run cold was the bottle in Jessica's hand. It was a vintage Cabernet I had been saving for a major career milestone, a bottle worth more than her car payment. It was open, half empty, and being sloshed around like cheap table wine, while she laughed at some joke a guy with muddy boots was telling while sitting on my pristine white bar stool. I stormed over, snatching the bottle from the table before another drop could be wasted, the sudden movement silencing the room. "Jessica, who gave you permission to take my wine and turn my house into a bar?" I snapped my voice, cutting through the music as I glared at her guests. The room went quiet, but Jessica didn't even flinch or look embarrassed. She just leaned back, swirling her glass with that infuriating smirk, looking at me as if I were a rude waiter interrupting her meal. "Come on, little sister, don't be so stingy," she replied, her voice dripping with condescension. "These bottles were just gathering dust in that cabinet. It's a crime to let them sit there. I'm just helping you enjoy them. Besides, my friends were thirsty, and a good hostess always provides the best." I looked around at the mess, realizing the invasion went deeper than just the living room. Earlier, I had gone upstairs to quickly change and found my personal bathroom ransacked. My specialized face creams imported from France, and incredibly expensive, were left uncapped and drying out on the counter. A limited edition lipstick lay smashed into the sink drain, destroyed with a carelessness that felt intentional. She hadn't just used them, she had destroyed them, treating my personal sanctuary and my hard-earned belongings as free samples for her amusement. The violation of privacy made my skin crawl, but her public dismissal of my feelings was the final straw. I want everyone out now, I demanded, looking at her group of sycophants who were still eating my food. This is a private residence, not a nightclub, and you are not welcome here. Jessica rolled her eyes and let out a dramatic sigh, turning to her friends with a look of mock apology. See what I have to deal with? She's such a bitter, boring old aunt. She's just jealous because she has to work all day while we actually know how to live. Sorry, guys. The fun police have arrived. Her friends snickered, looking at me with pity as if I was the intruder in my own home before slowly shuffling out, leaving a trail of cigarette ash and sticky floors behind them. When the door finally closed, I confronted her again, trembling with anger, telling her she had no right to alter my house or steal my property. She stood up, walking close to me, violating my personal space with a menacing look that erased her previous playfulness. Let's get one thing straight, Roxanne. Dad sent me here. He wants me to be comfortable because I'm going through a hard time. If I want pink walls to lift my mood, I get pink walls. If I want to drink wine to relax, I drink wine. I'm his favorite. Remember, you're just the one who pays the bills. So stop whining and go clean up this mess. I have a headache from your screaming. She brushed past me, bumping my shoulder deliberately, and headed toward the master bedroom. My bedroom, which she had been eyeing since day one, leaving me standing alone in the pink nightmare she had created, realizing that this was no longer a visit. It was a hostile takeover. On the first Monday morning of the month, the piling bills pushed the tension to a breaking point. I was sitting at my kitchen island sipping lukewarm coffee before heading to the office when my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank that nearly made me drop my mug. The supplementary credit card I had foolishly given to Jessica strictly for groceries and household essentials had just been declined. I frantically opened the banking app expecting to see a fraud alert or perhaps a double charge. Instead, my eyes widened in horror as I scrolled through a transaction history that read like a billionaire's shopping spree. There were charges for high-end designer boutiques, a $300 lunch at a French bistro, and a massive bill from a luxury day spa that cost more than my monthly car payment. In less than 10 days, she had completely maxed out the $5,000 limit I had set, leaving me responsible for a debt that I had not authorized. I marched into the guest room, shaking with rage, and threw the phone onto the bed where she was sleeping until noon as usual. When I demanded an explanation, demanding that she pay off the debt immediately or pack her bags, Jessica didn't even look guilty. She laughed in my face, telling me to relax, and that she needed those things to feel human again after her divorce. When I refused to back down and told her she had until tonight to leave, her demeanor shifted instantly. She pulled out her phone, her face twisting into a mask of fake sorrow, and dialed our father. I listened in disbelief as she sobbed into the receiver, lying through her teeth, that I was screaming at her over a few dollars for food, and that I was threatening to throw her out onto the street to starve. She hung up with a smirk, whispering, "You're in trouble now," before rolling over to go back to sleep. I drove to work with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, hoping that my father would at least listen to reason during business hours. I was wrong. Less than an hour after I arrived at my office, the peaceful hum of the marketing department was shattered. My father, Marcus, stormed through the glass doors of the main lobby like a bull, seeing red. He didn't stop at the reception desk to sign in. He shoved past the bewildered receptionist, shouting my name loud enough for the entire floor to hear. I rushed out of my cubicle, mortified, trying to intercept him before he caused a bigger scene. But the damage was already done. Colleagues were peering over their monitors, whispering as my father grabbed me by the arm and practically dragged me toward the conference room. He didn't care about my reputation or the professionalism I had worked so hard to build. To him, I was just a disobedient child who needed to be disciplined publicly. He shoved me into the glass-walled conference room, not bothering to lower the blinds, putting our dispute on display for everyone outside to see. Before I could even open the banking app to show him the evidence of Jessica's theft, he slammed his fist onto the mahogany table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He refused to look at the numbers. In his eyes, Jessica was the fragile victim who had lost everything, and I was the cruel, heartless sister kicking her while she was down. He ranted about family, loyalty, accusing me of being petty and calculating over money when my sister's mental health was at stake. He ignored the fact that she was stealing from me. He only saw that I was making his favorite daughter cry. The air in the room grew cold as he leaned in his face inches from mine, his eyes burning with an intensity that terrified me. My father pointed a shaking finger at my face and shouted, "I don't care if you're right or wrong. Your duty is to support your sister. If you dare kick her out, I will fire you immediately." I felt tears of frustration pricking my eyes, but I stood my ground, my voice trembling, but firm. "Dad, this is my private house, my money. You can't use work to force me to support a lazy person." My defiance only fueled his anger. He straightened up, buttoning his suit jacket with a chilling calmness that was far worse than his shouting. He looked down at me with pure disdain and delivered the final verdict. He reminded me that he built this company, that he knew everyone in the industry in Kentucky, and that my title existed only because he allowed it. He told me clearly that if I evicted Jessica, not only would I lose my job by the end of the day, but he would also personally ensure that my name was blacklisted across the state. No one would hire me, and my career would be over. He gave me a choice: be a doormat for Jessica or be unemployed and destitute. He turned and walked out, leaving me standing alone in the glass room, realizing that the man I called Dad was not my protector, but my captor. The golden opportunity for me to escape this hell appeared in mid-June when Jessica excitedly showed off her plane ticket for a vacation. She burst into the kitchen while I was preparing a modest dinner, waving her phone in my face with a triumphant grin that made my stomach churn. She announced that she was flying to Miami for a week-long wellness retreat with her girlfriends to recover from the stress of living in such cramped conditions. She didn't even bother to come up with a convincing lie about how she afforded first-class tickets and to stay at a 5-star oceanfront resort while being unemployed. We both knew my father had secretly funneled the money to her behind my back, rewarding her incompetence while threatening my livelihood. As she packed her bags, mocking me for having to stay behind and work like a peasant, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. She wasn't just leaving for a vacation. She was giving me a 7-day head start the moment her Uber disappeared down the street toward the airport. The smile dropped from my face, replaced by a look of steely determination. I didn't waste a single second. I immediately pulled out my burner phone, a precaution I had taken after realizing my father monitored the company plan, and dialed Leah, my best friend and the most ruthless real estate broker in the city. I didn't need a standard listing with open houses and 4 sale signs that would alert the neighbors or my father. I needed a ghost sale. I told Leah to activate the cash offer contingency we had discussed over whispered coffees weeks ago. I needed an investor who would buy the property as is no questions asked with a closing date of less than 5 days. Leah didn't ask why. She simply said, "Consider it done," and went to work. While Leah handled the house, I finalized the other half of my escape plan that I had been cultivating in the shadows. For the past month, I had been taking long lunches to interview via Zoom from my car and staying up until 3:00 a.m., perfecting my portfolio. The hard work had paid off spectacularly. In my inbox at a digitally signed offer letter from a massive design firm in Los Angeles. They offered a salary double what my father paid me, a signing bonus and full autonomy, everything my father had denied me. I accepted the offer with a shaking hand, feeling the heavy chains of my father's control begin to crack. I spent the next 2 days in a blur of adrenaline, forwarding important documents to a new secure email address and slowly erasing my digital footprint from the family company's servers. By Thursday, Leah had performed a miracle. She found a private investment group looking to expand their rental portfolio in Louisville. They didn't care about the pink walls or the mess. They only cared about the location and the price. The paperwork was rushed through with expedited fees that I happily paid. On Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with the most beautiful notification I had ever seen. Leah called me, her voice trembling with excitement. "Roxanne, the money just hit the wire. It's in your secret account. The new owner agreed to the terms, but they want possession immediately. You have to be out by Sunday. Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked around the living room at the walls my sister had defaced and the furniture she had ruined and felt absolutely no hesitation. I replied with a voice as cold as ice. "Absolutely. Sell it all. I don't want to leave a single crumb for them. Sell the furniture. Clear the accounts. I want to disappear without a trace." To ensure my departure remained a secret until the very last moment, I hired a specialized night owl moving service. They arrived at 2:00 a.m. on Saturday, their truck running quietly to avoid waking the neighborhood spies. I directed them with ruthless efficiency. They packed my clothes, my books, my personal documents, and the few pieces of furniture that held sentimental value. Everything else, the couch Jessica slept on, the TV she watched, and the dining table where my father had screamed at me, was left behind or sold to liquidators. However, I gave the movers strict instructions regarding the guest room and the living room piles. We didn't touch a single item belonging to Jessica. Her towers of shoeboxes, her racks of clothes, and her chaotic makeup stations were left exactly where they were, surrounded by the emptiness of a house that had been stripped of its soul. By the time the sun began to rise on Sunday morning, the house was a hollow shell, echoing with the silence of my departure, ready for the final act of my revenge. At exactly 1:00 a.m. on Sunday, Jessica pulled her suitcase up the driveway with freshly tanned skin and a satisfied smile plastered across her face. She walked with the confident swagger of someone who believed she had successfully broken my spirit, fully expecting to find me waiting inside with a prepared lunch and a humble apology for my previous behavior. She reached for the smart lock keypad, her long acrylic nails clicking against the buttons as she punched in the code she had been using for months. Instead of the familiar mechanical whir of the deadbolt sliding open, the keypad flashed an angry red light and emitted a harsh error beep that echoed in the quiet morning air. She frowned in confusion and entered the code again, slower this time, assuming she had made a mistake, but the result was the exact same rejection. Her confusion quickly mutated into the explosive temper I knew so well, and she began pounding her fist against the solid wood door. She screamed my name at the top of her lungs, accusing me of being petty and childish for changing the passcode just to annoy her after her vacation. She kicked the bottom of the door, shouting threats that she would call our father if I didn't open up immediately to carry her bags inside. She was so caught up in her tantrum that she didn't hear the heavy footsteps approaching from the other side until the lock clicked loudly. The door swung open with force, but the person standing there was not her submissive younger sister. Towering over her was a large man with a thick beard and tattoos running down his arms, holding the leash of a massive Rottweiler that was growling low in its throat. Jessica stumbled back in shock, nearly tripping over her own suitcase as the stranger looked down at her with zero patience. He didn't ask who she was. He simply demanded to know why she was banging on his front door and disturbing his peace on a Sunday morning. Jessica stammered, trying to regain her composure, and demanded to know what he was doing in her sister's house. The man laughed a dry and humorless sound and informed her coldly that this property had been legally purchased by him the previous day. He stepped out onto the porch and pointed a callous finger toward the edge of the sidewalk near the street. There piled haphazardly like refuse a mountain of black heavy-duty trash bags baking in the summer heat. He explained that the previous owner had left some junk behind that he didn't want, so he had bagged it up for trash collection, but she was welcome to scavenge through it if she wanted her clothes back. Panic finally pierced through Jessica's narcissism as she realized her entire wardrobe was sitting in garbage bags on the curb. She scrambled for her phone with trembling hands and dialed my number, her breathing shallow and erratic. Thousands of miles away, I was sitting on the balcony of my temporary corporate housing in Los Angeles, watching the sunlight glitter off the Pacific Ocean. When I saw her name flash on my screen, I answered with a calm satisfaction that I had never felt before. "Where are you? Why is there a strange man in your house?" Jessica screamed into the phone, her voice cracking with hysteria. "He says he lives here. You need to come back and fix this immediately." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the moment before delivering the truth she wasn't ready to hear. "That is not my house anymore, Jessica." "I sold it," I replied, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "And I am not in Louisville anymore. I moved to Los Angeles yesterday. Good luck with your luggage." I hung up before she could scream again, blocking her number immediately after. Back in Louisville, Jessica stood frozen on the lawn, staring at the phone in disbelief before frantically dialing the only person she thought could save her. Our father, Marcus, arrived 20 minutes later, screeching his luxury sedan to a halt in front of the house, ready to fire me on the spot for this insolence. He stormed up to the new owner, puffing out his chest and demanding to see the deed, claiming that the sale was fraudulent because he hadn't authorized it. The new owner, unbothered by Marcus's bluster, simply went inside and returned with a copy of the closing documents. Marcus snatched the papers, his eyes scanning the lines desperately for a loophole, but as he read, the color drained from his face. The sale was perfectly legal, signed, notarized, and funded with a cash wire that was irreversible. He looked at the date, realizing that while he was busy threatening my job and demanding I serve Jessica, I had been finalizing the sale of the only asset that kept a roof over her head. He looked at the pile of trash bags on the curb, then at the closed door of the house that was no longer ours, and for the first time in his life he realized he was completely powerless. 3 months have passed since the day I walked out that door, but news from Louisville still finds its way to my ears, mostly through Leah, who takes a grim satisfaction in updating me on the wreckage I left behind. While I was busy building a new life on the West Coast, the empire my father thought was invincible was crumbling into dust with terrifying speed. The furniture company, which Marcus had always claimed was built solely on his genius, turned out to be a hollow shell without my operational management. I had been the one nurturing client relationships, managing the supply chain, and overseeing the marketing campaigns that kept the revenue flowing. When I vanished, I took the passwords, the contacts, and the competence with me. Leah told me that within the first 6 weeks, 3 of their largest commercial clients canceled their contract, citing missed deadlines and unprofessional communication. My father, too arrogant to learn the systems I had built, tried to bully his way through meetings only to find that clients don't respond to threats the way his children did. The business didn't just stumble, it plummeted off a cliff, bleeding money faster than he could print it. Meanwhile, Jessica proved to be the final nail in his financial coffin. After being evicted from my former house by the new owner, she had no choice but to move into our father's estate. Any rational person would have seen this as a wake-up call to find employment and contribute. But Jessica saw it as a return to her rightful throne. She treated our father's home exactly as she had treated mine, demanding organic grocery deliveries, blasting the air conditioning day and night, and continuing her online shopping addiction despite having 0 income. She cried and manipulated him, claiming she was too depressed to work, and Marcus, desperate to maintain his image as the benevolent patriarch, drained his retirement savings to fund her lifestyle. He paid off the credit card debt she racked up on my account to avoid a lawsuit, but she simply opened new ones in his name. The liquidity he needed to save the dying company was being funneled directly into Jessica's closet, creating a whirlpool of debt that swallowed them both. The breaking point came late last month when the banks finally intervened. With the company's credit lines frozen and his personal savings depleted, Marcus faced a humiliation. I know he never imagined foreclosure. To pay off the massive accumulation of Jessica's debts and try to salvage the remaining scraps of the business, he was forced to sell his own home, the sprawling 4-bedroom colonial house that was the symbol of his status in Kentucky. Leah sent me the listing link. It was sold for under market value for a quick cash injection, echoing the exact move I had made 3 months prior. The irony was poetic. The man who threatened to destroy my career if I didn't provide housing for his favorite daughter had now lost his own housing because of her. The reality of their new life is a stark contrast to the luxury they felt entitled to. Leah learned through mutual acquaintances that they are now living in a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the outskirts of the city, a place with thin walls, peeling paint, and a lingering smell of dampness. The dynamic between them has shifted from codependency to toxic resentment. Neighbors have reportedly complained about the screaming matches echoing from their unit late at night. Jessica blames our father for losing everything and failing to provide for her, while Marcus screams at her for being a parasite who bled him dry. They are trapped together in a prison of their own, making miserable and hating each other, yet unable to separate because neither has the means to survive alone. It was in the middle of a strategy meeting at my new job that my phone buzzed with a notification from the blocked messages folder. My father had been trying to call me for weeks, but I had directed all legal communication through Leah. However, one voicemail managed to slip through the cracks of my service provider. I stepped out onto the balcony of my office, looking out at the palm trees, and decided to listen to it just once to confirm that I had made the right choice. The voice that played was unrecognizable, cracked, desperate, and stripped of all its former arrogance. "Roxanne, it's Dad. Listen, I was wrong." His voice trembled, breaking with the sob that sounded pathetic rather than sad. "The company is going under. I don't know the login for the vendor portal. Please, you have to come back. I'll make you a partner. I'll even kick Jessica out if that's what you want. Just come back and fix this." I listened to the message until the very end, feeling absolutely nothing but a cold confirmation of who he really was. He wasn't sorry for how he treated me. He was sorry that he was losing money. He was willing to throw his beloved Jessica onto the street the moment she became a liability, just as he had tried to throw me away when I refused to be a servant. I didn't reply. I didn't feel a surge of pity or a desire to gloat. I simply pressed the delete button, erasing his voice from my life, just as I had erased his influence, and walked back into my meeting, leaving them to rot in the ruins they had built. One windy afternoon on Santa Monica Beach, I sat, alone, quietly, looking back at the stormy journey that had passed. The rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the shore replaced the yelling and chaos that used to define my daily existence. Here in Los Angeles, I am no longer defined by my last name or my father's looming shadow. I have successfully built a solid reputation at my new firm, where I was recently promoted to a senior strategy role. My colleagues respect me not because of who my father is, but because of my ideas, my work ethic, and the results I deliver. For the first time in my life, I walk into meetings with my head held high, knowing that my seat at the table is something I earned entirely on my own merit without any strings attached. I also finally purchased a place of my own, a modest studio apartment in a quiet neighborhood just a few blocks from the water. It isn't a sprawling estate like the one my father lost, nor is it the house in Louisville that held so many bad memories. It is small, cozy, and completely mine. I painted the walls a soothing sage green, because that is what I wanted. And there isn't a single speck of unwanted pink paint in sight. The best part is the door. When I lock it at night, I know with absolute certainty that no one is going to burst in, demanding my bed, stealing my food, or destroying my peace. I have total control over who steps across my threshold. And for the first time, my home is truly my sanctuary. Last weekend, Leah flew out for a business trip, and we met for drinks on a rooftop bar overlooking the city lights. It was a surreal moment to sit there with the woman who helped me orchestrate my escape. Looking down at the sprawling metropolis that is now my home, we raised our glasses of champagne and made a toast, not to revenge, but to survival. We clinked glasses to the most terrifying and courageous decision I ever made, the decision to surgically remove the toxic tumor that was my family. Leah laughed, telling me that I looked 10 years younger without the weight of their drama dragging me down. And she was right. I felt lighter, as if gravity had less of a hold on me here. The contrast between my life and theirs could not be more stark. While I am sitting here breathing in the salty ocean air, planning my next weekend getaway, Marcus and Jessica are likely in their damp apartment, arguing over whose turn it is to pay the electric bill. They are waking up every day to the harsh reality of their own incompetence, forced to navigate a world that no longer caters to their delusions of grandeur. They are paying the price for their arrogance day by agonizing day. I don't wish them harm, but I certainly don't wish them well. They are simply ghosts to me, now fading memories of a life I have outgrown. As the sun began to set over the Pacific painting, the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, I smiled. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with freedom, and turned my back to the east. I will never look back. This painful journey taught me that shared DNA is not a license for abuse. We are often conditioned to believe that we must tolerate toxicity, disrespect, and exploitation simply because it comes from family. That is a lie. True family supports you. They do not drain you dry and threaten your livelihood to serve their own selfishness. The second lesson is that financial independence is the ultimate form of freedom. Money isn't just currency. It is the power to say no, the power to walk away, and the power to build a fortress that no one can invade. If I hadn't saved my own money and owned my own assets, I would have been trapped in that cycle forever. Finally, being decisive is the only way to save yourself. You cannot negotiate with parasites. You have to cut them off completely, or they will consume you until there is nothing left. Thank you so much for listening to my story until the very end. It wasn't easy to relive these memories, but I hope my experience gives you the courage to set your own boundaries. If you have ever dealt with toxic family members, or had to make a hard choice to save yourself, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share this video. It helps more than you know. Stay